Let's move on to our chart of the day. Obviously, the U.S. is such a massive producer. So the question here is, why not just grow the supply of oil? Well, specifically, large publicly traded firms have suggested they're restraining growth through the run-up in prices. And the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas asked the question, well, why? And this is a very interesting chart we have here. It's not government regulations or concerns over the transition to green for why they aren't growing and doing more oil exploration to alleviate the prices. A majority of respondents said it's investor pressure to maintain capital discipline. And as we know, turning on supply is costly. So one reading of this might be, again, one reading might be that investors are seeing through the high worldwide demand as transitory effectively. And they don't want these companies like a Shell or like an ExxonMobil spending the money for more oil exploration. A very interesting finding here, Akiko, that would suggest that there really are a lot of perhaps shareholder pressures on companies to not do more or not be more active in drilling more to alleviate some of the high price pressures we've been seeing.
Well, and Brian, that's something we have heard from oil executives directly who've said, look, we kind of want the green light here, that we don't necessarily have to pass down, sort of do the buybacks, sort of pass down the costs or the profits, I should say, down to shareholders. And obviously shareholders certainly very sensitive after, just what we've gone through over the last 2 years. I mean, it was only 2 years ago, Brian, that we were talking about lows here when everything stopped because of the pandemic. So we have heard oil executives talk about getting the green light from shareholders, but also getting backing from the White House to say, look, this is what's needed right now. The White House obviously doesn't want to go that far. We've heard the consistent messaging being that in the short term, we're going to continue to have fossil fuels, but the investments needs to go to renewable energy. So it's an interesting dynamic that we're starting to see. And oil and gas companies, as profitable as it is for them right now because of the high prices we're seeing, still caught in a bind a bit here because they do see on the one side pressure to try and increase production, and yet shareholder pressure to say, this is not exactly what's needed long term.
Yeah, and then my last comment here is really just that this is likely to energize a lot of the political interest into, at least on the Democrat side of things, kind of framing all of this as a function of the corporations being greedy. Now, of course, there are a lot of other reasons for why headline inflation is up that doesn't have to do necessarily with just the corporate power themselves, but expect to hear a lot more of this rhetoric.
Yeah, no question about that. And it's going to get a lot more political, as I said. This is certainly something that I would imagine a lot of Republican candidates as well looking to run with it because people are feeling the pain and you've got midterms sort of just several months down the road.